Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Those are in a different order today, I guess, because it's a different order for us. But that's because we have an extremely special guest from the other side of the planet. Yes. And speaking of planets, I believe we as a nation, as a society, as a globe, have encountered Mars again just a few minutes ago, right?
A successful landing, which is fantastic. So excited, and I can't believe I missed it because I was setting everything up for the stream. I was like, hey, I knew it was like 1 to 1:15, but I missed it. So I have to rewatch the recording.
Well, wasn't there one that landed a few years ago that absolutely plowed into the surface?
Was it not the British one, or the European Space Agency that they send one and then no contact whatsoever after the landing?
Yeah, maybe calling it a landing was optimistic, but
crash landing. By the way, I was reading the story about all these things, and up until this point, we've been landing on airbags. So apart from the last two rovers, everything before that, it was just dropped from an extremely high altitude, and then you had to rely on airbags to land somewhere randomly, because
they ought to do. They ought to hire Volvo to build the airbags for them. I know I'd heard that like at one point like the units of measurement that were used were different. I don't know if that was an urban legend or not, but that apparently one of them just absolutely cratered itself, like just plowed into the surface with reckless abandon.
It was based on that. Imperial and metric. It was made a whole case of whether we should standardize across the board, because you have the European Space Agency, you have the Indian Space Agency, you have the Chinese Space Agency. A lot of agencies are involved in these cross-humanity efforts, and it's a pity to see all that effort go to waste in the last 7 minutes of terror anyway. So yeah, we landed, man. And talking about Mickael, which we'll introduce in a second, like we should see some debugging errors. Apparently one of the, I think it was Spirit, one of the rovers that we landed before, went into this kind of crazy loop where it was restarting itself. So for the first 47 days, it was just going into an incredibly fast loop because it was in the ROM that was starting up. And guess what? They were able to fix it remotely. Like, how the hell do you flash and wipe files out of the ROM on the machine? It was a software error. They figured it out, and then they were able to fix it remotely. And then after like 47 days, they were able to communicate again with the rover. It was like mind blowing.
Yeah, insane. My security system needed an update, and they charged me $100 to send out a dude with a USB stick. Like, damn. Like, really? We're gonna do this? Wow. So I get it. So
I wish I could work for NASA, man. I wonder what it takes. Probably clever people, not me.
I wanted to be an astronaut.
Not clever enough for NASA.
I think like everybody when they're like 15, and they I think by 15 I was already too large, too tall, too wide, too heavy, too everything. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just give up.
You're too clever for NASA. We can't send you there.
I'll just go do. Well, it definitely wasn't that one. That wasn't the one. But I guess I'll just go. I was like, I guess I'll just go do software for a living instead. I'll just watch lots of movies about space. I did read Lost Moon, which I think has been retitled to Apollo 13, but it was really good. It was, of course, it was the book that the movie was based on. And then Gene Kranz's book, I think it was called Failure's Not an Option. I actually liked Gene Kranz's book better. It was just because he talks about his whole history and Mission Control and Mercury and Gemini and all the early ones too. And it was just really, really good book. And quite fascinating. So, yeah.
And if you're not a person that likes books, or you prefer to have the visual element of it, there's a fantastic TV series on Disney Plus. What's it called? First Steps? Can't remember what it's called, which was fascinating. And there's the Discovery. What's the Discovery? Oh, the Challenger series as well. Like what led to the disaster of and the accident of Challenger's launch. Lots of interesting stuff.
Yeah, the Netflix series was really good.
From distance, because I will never be there. Although in saying that, I said I will never be at Microsoft, and then I joined Microsoft at some point. So maybe dreams can always come true if you believe in them.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I like working here, but somehow I feel like one of these dreams was far more attainable from the very beginning. Something tells me that no matter how hard I tried, I might be able to, sweep the floors or something at NASA. But
and I don't want to be ageist, but dude, all the people on the stream today from NASA, JBL, NASA, they were like 25. How the hell?
They're the future, man.
Yeah, I know. They are the future. I mean, I get it. But I mean, what age do you have to graduate to be lead engineer at this project when you're like 32? I don't know. I don't think I can even sweep the floors at NASA these days.
Yeah, your back starts to hurt. Your shoulders get sore.
Sorry, sir, you don't qualify for this.
Yeah,
we have some high standards.
Sorry. So anyway, sorry. Mickael is our guest today.
Yep.
Great to see you from the other side of the planet.
Too.
How are you this morning? Morning for you, right?
Yeah, morning for me.
It's Friday morning.
In the morning. It's Friday.
Friday morning. So you're in the future. So you've already seen the landing from yesterday, right?
Yeah, they have the data now. We discovered something amazing, but if you have 18 hours,
Is there anything we need to know between now and tomorrow morning that we should go and prepare for?
I'll give you the surprise.
Oh God.
So Mickael, tell us a bit about what you do.
So I'm a technical lead for application development and management at Telstra Purple, which is a new Australian consultancy. And I work in an internal team. I'm not a consultant. I used to do that, but I'm not going to Flying Geeks anymore. So I look after internal .NET-based applications mainly. And so I've gotten to know Azure Identity, how to use it in different ways. And so that's what I'm going to be showing today.
Okay, cool.
Talking about .NET, I mean, I'm going to take the thunder from tomorrow's news, but .NET 6 has been announced. We have the preview 1 out, which is freaking awesome. If you haven't had a time to play with it, go and download. It's available
speaking of .NET 6, yesterday I asked what I thought was a fairly simple question, which is, what do people use to build desktop apps? Because I haven't built a desktop app. I have not built a desktop app in years. Because desktop, the people still use those, Mm-hmm. And I asked the question, and well, first, there were two things about it. First, I had a lot of really helpful responses, and I really appreciate it. Secondly, the most helpful response was from somebody in DevDiv, somebody in the developer group, and it took 3 tweets to explain what was just available, not even what potentially I should use. And so, while I am super appreciative of the fact that they told me all of the different things that I should consider, I was like,
you went with Java.
No, actually, I was like, you know what? I'll just do I said, no, I'll just do a console app instead. I'll hire a designer to build me a UI. So I started working on a Teams client for just IM, and
I knew it. I told you. I knew that you were working on that yesterday because you were so quiet. You were off all the time. It's like, he's writing code. What kind of code is he writing?
And then the thing
fun without me.
Well, then the thing I realized was like, what would be even better would be to write an IRC head for Teams, so I could just use any IRC client. Ooh. And it means I don't have to build UI. So thank you, AZ Wildfire. We love you too more than that.
Oh God, that's a loyal fan. He deserves a t-shirt.
Damn. Anyway, sorry. So anyway, Mickael. So what are you gonna? Oh wait, sorry. We have one more thing we have to do first. So. Christos successfully
really excited about that.
Clearly. So Christos has successfully convinced our management to buy us new hardware for testing, of course. Exactly. It sat in my house for a week and a half, and then I finally took it to UPS, where it sat apparently at UPS for a few nights because overnight, who cares? It's not an SLA. It's
It's advisory.
Yeah, you shipped something overnight, but that's just guideline, right? Well, it's best effort. So like a week later, you got it. Whatever.
Yeah, it took like a month and a half before we got it in our hands. From the point that it's approved to getting in my hands, and it's been in my house since last Friday, and I was like, I want to unbox this live. right?
Yep.
So it's our first unboxing because you were supposed to do an unboxing on your Surface Duo, but you didn't.
I did. Thank you.
Yeah,
we did do it.
It was less than exciting.
Okay.
There was no hype. You didn't build a hype.
All right. Well, let's get to it.
Let's get to it. So I haven't even seen it yet. I haven't even opened it. Although I was surprised they came without a plastic wrapper. Did yours come with a plastic wrapper?
Around the box?
Yeah.
I don't remember. These are implementation. These are implementation details I don't remember.
Okay, like pretty basic stuff, right? So that's the box over there, and then the usual plastic wrapper around it. There we go.
That noise you're hearing is the
that is correct. It is an M1.
That noise that you're hearing is a narwhal eating the plastic and choking on it. Somewhere in the Pacific.
I know, man. We need less plastic. Oh, check this out. They got a tape around the port.
You're not showing anybody.
Sorry. There. There's.
Is that electrical tape?
It looks like it. Yeah.
Okay.
Here. Oh, check this out. Ta-da.
Okay.
It looks very familiar to the one I had from 2011, by the way, with the difference of mini display ports.
Uh-huh.
Oh, no, these are not mini display ports.
Those are USB-C.
Oh, USB-Cs. Oh, powered USB-Cs, though. See, there's a power there. There's one HDMI, so how do you do dual screen on these ones? Do you have a splitter?
USB-C and HDMI.
That's a good point. And then we have two USB 3s, I guess. They're not blue. So does that mean that...
They're USB something. I don't know what.
Yeah, fair enough. And then the power. And then the power button over here. Underneath. Is this something they can actually pop out and change?
No, I don't think so.
Well, this
As
how you
I
upgrade
understand,
the memory on the older ones, right?
Yeah, they've been soldering it in since like 2014, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, we didn't get the super maxed out version. So this is what we had here. Device, and then we have the power cable. Fairly basic stuff.
Look at all that packaging for a power cable. I mean, they literally could have just thrown it in the box.
They could. But it's not that the whole experience of... I don't know, I mean, companies need to start being more responsible about what they do here, because 3/4 of the box is just empty space.
Mm-hmm.
It's going back in the box.
So, you know, it's funny. So here's one, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
And you would think, oh, it looks just like Christos's. But you can open the bottom. You can even put your own memory in here. But it's because it's from 2012. And they're like physically identical. I kind of wonder how much yours weighs comparatively, because they are, I mean, Christos was like, we're going to do an unboxing today. And I was like, oh, yeah? And he says, yeah. And it's like, how is this literally, where's the excitement? It's literally the same design and has been forever.
Check this out. It has a Microsoft asset barcode.
I think that's why it took so many weeks to get here. Was it gets shipped from the factory to some other group, and then that group sticks stickers on them and images them, and then they ship it to you. Because when I got
that's why I don't have the wrapper.
I got a box that had two of those. It had two, like the box that I shipped you, which I hope you saw the special label I put on it.
Yes, very special. I loved it.
The box that I shipped you, like I had two of those boxes in a bigger box. So I just took it out and put a label on it and shipped it. So like it got shipped somewhere else, then it got shipped here, then it got shipped to you. So it's been across the country. It's been across the country at least twice.
Right. Okay,
so
well, let me. Oh my God, my phone is boiling right now. See, I have my inception over here, obviously, but the phone is boiling from displaying it.
Oh. Anyway. All right. Anyway. Okay.
Anyway,
so that was
fun.
Thank you for that.
Should we do more unboxing? Oh. I ordered a standing desk. My wife is not happy because I already have a giant wooden desk in front of me, which is very conventional. And when we're buying it, I was like, that looks good. And then it doesn't look good anymore because I have to sit down. Plus, it has giant drawers. I need to do this at some point, show you the desk. I mean, it's lovely. It's wooden. It's like solid wood. But it's not techy enough. So I ordered a standing desk, which is going to arrive next week. Maybe we can do the unboxing there. But My wife's like, what are you going to do with the big giant ass desk that you have over there? I'm like, I'm going to stick it on the other side. And then I'm going to have this one over here with the Mac Mini and the 2 other monitors. So she's definitely not happy because I said 2 more monitors. It's like, no.
Just sell it.
Sell the desk?
Yeah. It's a desk.
I'm going to buy it now.
I mean, so my wife hired somebody to come and help us. We need to build the office upstairs. And we were going to build the office, like build out an office upstairs, get doors put on, whatever. And then we were going to redo the floors. Because the floors are this really awful tile. Like, whoever designed this house had clearly been watching Under the Tuscan Sun, like, on repeat for 20 years. And since neither of us are Diane Lane, we're like, we don't want to live in this, faux Italy thing anymore. And so we want to get rid of this tile because the tile's really ugly. And it's just been, I mean, she was down here like seconds before we started the show complaining. So it's just
wife was
super
complaining, or the interior designer was complaining?
My wife was complaining about the interior designer because she's like, she's sending us these pieces of furniture. And she's like, oh, well, what about something like this? And it's like a $4,000 bookcase. All right. Okay. So let's skip the fact that a bookcase by design is hollow, right? So you stick stuff in it.
Yes.
At $4,000, right? And I'm like, I got 3 kids under 7. It's gonna have somebody's initials carved in it, like as they're bringing it in the room. Like, why on earth would I want to buy that? Meanwhile, I still have no office and I still have no new floors. So it's like, what are you doing? Stop looking for furniture and please just help us find people to build the office and put the floors in. But whatever, it doesn't really matter. Anyway,
I'll come down and do it for you, man, for $2,000. How about that?
Well, the flooring person came over and she tells us, she's like, with this floor, when we take the tile out, you're going to have a 1/2 inch gap underneath your door frames, and we're going to have to build up to, so you don't have a big gap. And it was like, oh, I never would have thought about that. Like, how on earth have I ever thought about that? So, yeah. And yes, Robertables, we did see that we saw some Earth stuff landed on Mars. And it was super exciting. And somehow, I'm glad that they accommodated us and our show by landing it right before the show started. So I appreciate that.
If only they could raid our channel. They have 83,000 people there. I'm not asking for a lot. Just
they had 185 or 200,000 like right before 4 o'clock.
Yes.
So
yeah. Obviously, all the 100,000 people that dropped off NASA, they're coming to our channel eventually.
Clearly. So
yes.
All right. Well, let's get going. Let's get going with Mickael. We've made him endure enough of our silliness. So
sorry, Mickael.
I didn't know that was a thing. Wow.
Sorry, that's the whistle. Yeah. Somebody told us. They said we need. That's our signal to get the show started. That's our boss saying, "You guys need to pick this up. This needs to be marginally entertaining, and it's not right now." So anyway, sorry, Mickael. The floor. No, he's not even around. I'm just kidding. Mickael, the floor is yours. Please, I'm ready to learn.
Cool. Thanks a lot. So yeah, these days, we build applications that connect to multiple various services. It can be a SQL database, it can be a distributed cache instance, it can be some sort of storage. And every time our application needs to connect to one of those, we need to authenticate ourselves. So typically we do this with connection strings, API keys, whatnot. What I'm going to show today, or what we're going to show, sorry, this is not my show, is how we can connect to services without any credentials. And there's 2 ingredients to that recipe, so to speak, which are the first one. In Azure, some of the services support Azure AD authentication. So it means from an identity in your Azure AD can connect to one of those services. The second ingredient is that some of the Azure resources can have attached to themselves a managed identity. So your application automatically becomes someone concrete in your directory. And so you can give that identity permissions to connect to other services. I'm just going to put some quick links in the chat. So we have here an overview of Azure Managed Identity. The second one is the first one that I mentioned, the list of Azure services that support Aad Authentication, and I'll open this one in my shared screen as well. And the third one, which is on the same page, but we'll have a look at that a bit later, is the list of services that can get assigned an identity. I'm going to switch. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That's an important part, right? Is not every service supports using a managed identity in the sense of having one available, and not every service that you're going to talk to supports Azure AD authentication, and by extension doesn't then support managed identity.
Yep.
Exactly. So you really need to host your application from one of the services that can be assigned a managed identity. This is the first section of that application. And so we can see that we have the usual suspects: app service, function app. I think there's also Azure Data Factory and a bunch more that I probably don't know about right now. And from one of these services, you need to connect to one that supports Aad authentication. And that's also very important because not all of them support that. A good example is that you might think of Azure Storage as one big service, one offering. Well, it's true because that's how it's being promoted, I'd say, by Azure. But only the blob storage and queues support Aad authentication. If you hit Azure Tables, which is still a part of the Azure Storage offering, you can't use Aad authentication. So you need to resort to using the storage account key in this case. So what we'll show today is how to build a web application, so an ASP.NET Core application that's going to show data from two different sources, one of them being blob storage, and the second one being Azure SQL. And I guess the latter, Azure SQL, is maybe more important because virtually 95%, I don't know, I'm making this up, but a lot of applications in Azure connect to Azure SQL. And being able to not have a connection string with credentials in there is fantastic. Even though you might secure your connection string in Key Vault and have the app service retrieve that connection string securely, that's really good. But if you can go the extra step by having no credentials at all to secure, it's even better.
Secretless apps, absolutely.
And so when your application runs in Azure and you want to leverage Azure Managed Identity, this is where the Azure Identity library comes into play. I'll put that in the chat very quickly and open it here. So training dot, apologies. So Azure Identity is a client library part of the Azure SDK. Its main responsibility is to fetch tokens, acquire tokens. That's really all it does. But the main advantage of that is that it's built on top of a very simple abstraction, and it can source tokens from many different places. Please let me know if we can't read this. I don't know how much I'll be able to have a look at the chat, so feel free to stop me if we need to.
No, I think it looks good. I mean, and this is kind of one of the big selling points, right? Is if I'm using something like an MSAL, which of course we've covered countless times. If I'm using something like an MSAL, I sort of like, I mean, I've got to build that auth in myself. Essentially, I've got to figure out how to authenticate the user. but having this whole suite of existing developer tool-based things available, like that makes it much easier to start getting tokens and doing work.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think the color coding in this image is fantastic. So the green ones are the ones that will probably be used when your app is deployed in Azure. So the first two ones are getting, let's say, account information from environment variables. So this is using the client credentials flow. So usually you'll have a tenant ID, a client ID, and a client secret. And then Azure Identity does all of its magic to get a token with that information. The second one is the managed identity, and this one can only be used in Azure because, of course, that environment, I don't know if that's the right word, but managed identity only exists when your app runs in Azure. The good thing is that we also have the orange ones, and this is where you might want to use Aad authentication when you do local development on your machine. And Azure Identity allows that by being able to source accounts from 3 different sources: the account that you're logged in Visual Studio, the account that you're logged in VS Code, or the account that you're logged in the Azure CLI. And there's also, at the very right of this picture, support for interactive authentication. We won't go into this today. I think this is useful only if you're building console applications, and you might want to use, I don't know, either open a browser to have the user login, or maybe the device code flow, but we won't go into that today. So what we'll do today, as I said before, is build an app that first gets its data from blob storage, and I'll get that data first locally from my emulator, and then we'll see how from my local machine I can connect to a storage account that is in Azure using the account that I'm logged in VS Code with very minimal setup required. We'll then switch the data source from blob storage to SQL. Again, I have a local database on my machine where we'll be able to get data. And then we'll deploy this application to Azure and see how we can have app service connect to Azure SQL without the need for credentials. We'll also have a look at how we can make sure that the application runs correctly in both ways, in the sense that it needs to work when I run the application locally, and it needs to run nicely as well when I run the application in Azure, with hopefully minimal configuration settings for us to make.
All right, cool. I think SQL is an interesting one too, because I always felt like the SQL Azure AD setup always seemed a bit it just seemed like a lot of work. Like there were just so many commands, as opposed to, say, just doing like blob storage where you just put the user into an RBAC role and you're kind of done. The SQL one always felt like it was some work over here in Azure and RBAC and some work over here in SQL, and it always seemed difficult. So I'm glad we're diving into it today. So it's cool.
Cool. And I had a look at the docs today, and the docs page to enable Aad Auth is inexplicably long. Maybe there are scenarios that I'm not aware of that require more configuration, but what we'll do here, yes, there's a few steps, but it's definitely less scary than what I could see this morning on the docs page. Let me have a look if I have any other links right now. No, I think that's it. Cool. So I'm going to open Visual Studio. I'm going to start my, how do I call that? My storage emulator. So I'm using Azure RIDE here, which, if you don't know, is the cross-platform Azure storage emulator.
Can you zoom in a little bit, Mickael, if you don't mind?
Yep. On the console, on Visual Studio.
Console and Visual Studio would be nice. I think your resolution is, you have a really good camera or resolution and monitor, which means that we can ensure that everybody can see it.
Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So yeah, Azure Write is the cross-platform storage emulator. The biggest selling point for Azure Write to me is that it can store data in different locations. So here, for this project, I'm storing the data in the .azure Write folder of this Git repository. If I go to another project and launch Azure Write, telling it source and put data in a different folder, then they will be both separate. Whereas I think the classic Azure Storage Emulator just has a central location to store data. And so if you have two applications using the same, I don't know, blob container names, there's probably going to be some conflict going on here.
Yeah, and it's local DB too. So you've got to have local DB installed, which I learned the other day when I was trying to install the storage emulator.
Yep.
So,
true.
Yep.
Yeah, good point. I'm going to start this, and while we talk about Azure Write, yet another quick link for the stream in case people are interested. And there's one other thing that I forgot to talk about is Azure Identity is part of the latest Azure SDK. So I think there's been several, I don't know how to call them, several major versions of the Azure SDK. I think at first we had the really first packages, NuGet packages that were targeting .NET Framework only. Mm-hmm. So I think for storage, it was called Windows Azure.Storage.
Funny story about that. I had the first NuGet package that was under Azure Storage, and I registered that, even before the Azure SDKs were around. And at some point, I was, when I moved to the US, so about 2.5 years ago, somebody reached out to me from NuGet. It's like, so the Azure SDKs team went to NuGet, they found the package owner, and they reached out to me. They're like, by the way, would you mind releasing that name for us? I'm like, absolutely. The guys take over. Makes sense. But it was funny how things come around. But yeah, we've been through a few iterations of the Azure Storage and the Azure SDKs to our customers' delight.
Yeah. So this was the first one. This one is really long dead, so please don't use this one. Then I think when .NET Core came around, the team released a .NET standard version, which could run in both .NET Framework and .NET Core. So the package name changed to Microsoft.Azure.something, in this case, storage.blob. And recently, there's been, I think, a push for consistency around how client libraries are released and things like that. So there's now the ultimate, latest, never going to change in the future version of the blob client library. And this is this one that we are going to use. This is the only one that supports Azure Identity. Now, because it could be a bit confusing as to which version of the client library do I need to use to make sure that I can use Azure Identity, the team has this very nice Azure SDK release page where they have all the client libraries, and most of the time it says, so this one, when it goes GA, because this one is not GA yet, it will replace this one. So if you're wondering whether the service that you want to connect to has a client library that supports Azure Identity, you can come here. I know there's an aka.ms link that goes directly to here. Unfortunately, I don't know this one.
aka.ms /AZSDK. And you can also use azure.com/SDK. It will take you to the azure.com download space.
Really cool.
Yep. I put them on the chat, so if people want to know about it, they can always find them. We'll put them on the YouTube video as well, so people can also reference them.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. So in this first version that I'm going to show, we're using only one client library. It's I'm going to search for blob here. This one, storage blobs. And so right now the application only connects to my local Azure Write instance. So let's jump in the code and see how this is done. So I have here a very, very simple ASP.NET Core application that's using .NET 5, even though that's not really important. And so we're registering in here a blob service client instance, which is the client that allows us to interact with the blob service. We can see, and I'm sorry, I don't know, do you know if I can upscale or zoom the IntelliSense pop-ups as well? Because that's going to be illegible for people watching the stream.
I don't think you can do it in Visual Studio. You can do it in Visual Studio Code, if I remember correctly. Because everything zooms together, right?
I've never seen a good way to do it in VS, in regular, full-fat Visual Studio, sadly.
Okay.
That's okay. I mean, there's also stuff like Magnifier, which you could use temporarily, in and out, to zoom in and out.
Yep. I think it's going to be easy enough, so I won't have to dive in really for a long time to show this. But this one is using the overload. Actually, I can just F12 that thing. So the overload of the constructor is taking a connection string. And so if we have a look in the app settings.json, we can see that the storage connection string setting goes to my development storage emulator, in this case, Azure. We also have here another registration for an iPerson provider interface. I'm not trying to over-engineer things, but it's just that as we move to SQL and then to EF Core, it's going to be easy to just have new implementations of this interface without having to update the view. And in here, this one is really simple, so it connects to blob storage. It gets the people container, fetches all the blobs, which are JSON files right now. And I should probably be able to show this. And while this loads, for each blobs that we have in this container, we retrieve it, deserialize into a person, which today is just the first name, last name, and age. And then the view displays these people. It's really as simple.
And you're just storing JSON right now in the blob, right?
Yeah, just JSON.
I mean, is there so thinking about it, are you using that as a dump of JSON data, or are you using it as a backend for your solution? Because people may say, why not use something like Cosmos DB for this instance?
Good question.
For this kind of data, right?
Yep. It's really just for the sample.
Okay.
Yeah.
No worries.
I don't know if Cosmos DB supports Aad Auth. I suspect it does, so I could have gone with Cosmos DB. I think I've been working with blob storage in the past, so this was the easiest thing for me to do.
But it wasn't a trick question. Don't worry about it. But people will be wondering, why am I dumping? People will be watching the show and be like, oh, I can put JSON data there. But then again, it comes the question: how do I query the data, and how can I efficiently use the data? I mean, you could dump Azure Search on top of that, and maybe now you can use Azure Search to query your blob data, and now you have a cheaper way of querying data. And yeah. I'll give you a story. I had a customer once in the UK that were actually storing traffic data from vehicles into Cosmos DB, and it was insane because rather than doing it in blob, which was cheaper because it was just dumb data, they were storing everything in Cosmos DB, and they were incurring large costs just dumping the data there. So they just need to make people aware that depending on what you need to do with the data, you need to choose the appropriate medium, and there are ways around it. But cool, thank you.
All right, so just for the sake of showing what's in these JSON files, I'll just open this here. So really simple, a first name, a last name, and age. And I think I have 30 different blobs in here containing 30 different people. So if I run this application right now, I'll have to open this one and move it across. So we can see that we get data from Azure Blob Storage, and we can see this data. Now that's all fine, but now what we want to do is get data as myself, as my account, from the storage account that we have in Azure. Sorry, struggling a bit here. So I'll just show as well that if I go to the Azure portal on this other profile, which is linked to my Visual Studio Professional subscription, I'll make that heaps bigger. I also have a storage account called Azure Identity Lightstream, and using Storage Explorer, we can see the container with the same name and a different set of JSON files dumped into this container.
Right.
So to do this, there's two changes we need to make. The first one, actually three. The first one is on this specific storage account, I need to assign an RBAC role to the account that I'm going to use to connect to it.
Ah, very nice. So now we're locking down access to a specific account, right?
Yes, correct. So this is the account that I'm going to use, and even though I'm a contributor, that doesn't give me implicit permissions to read or write data from this storage account. So I need to add a new role assignment, which I can't do because I'm only a contributor here. So I'll move back to this one, which is my the account owner of this subscription. I'll make it a bit bigger. I am role assignments. And so blob storage has specific RBAC roles. So we can see we have blob data contributor, which I think is read-write, blob data owner, I'm not too sure what the difference is, blob data reader, and blob delegator in case you want to create SAS tokens, I'm going to call them, and then share publicly some blobs with other people. So I'm just going to assign storage blob data reader here and pick the account here. That is the first step. The second one is, as we saw here, Azure Identity can source account information from different sources. So in this case, I'm going to use VS Code. So if I go to VS Code, I need to have this Azure account extension installed, because this is the one that Azure Identity is going to interact with to, let's say, fetch account information. So what I can do is use the Azure sign in with device code command. I'm going to make sure to open the right browser profile, click copy and open, paste this code. Yes, that's me. And now VS Code here at the bottom knows that I'm logged into Azure with my account. The last change that we need to make is in the application, so that instead of using a connection string based authentication to blob service, it uses an Aad auth authentication. So the first thing that I need to do, and it's interesting that the blob package is not here, but it compiled, so it must be referencing it from somewhere else.
It works, I don't know why. Man, we should get our emotes. We have some emotes coming to the channel, and one of them is like, I don't know why it's working. but it's working. It's lovely.
It might be, no, I actually don't know. So I'm going to reference Azure Identity and the other one as well, because that's a bit concerning, and I'm afraid it might cause issues in the future. Not this one, that's the old one. Cool. So if we have a look at, again, the signatures for the blob service client class, the one that we were using so far is the connection string one. And there's another one here that takes the URI to the blob service and also a token credential. And so token credential is really the heart of Azure Identity. It's an abstraction that only defines two methods: how to get a token, both synchronously and asynchronously. And if we go back to Azure Identity here, it means that there's an implementation or a class that inherits from token credential from each of those sources. So two changes that I need to make in the app. The first one is, instead of the connection string, is use the URI to the service endpoint. And so this is always https:// the name of the service account, .blob.core.windows.net.
And that's all we need to connect, right? Instead of having an SAS key or a
Exactly.
signature or the actual storage key, which used to be the case in the past, and they had to roll the keys every time you linked to one and what have you.
Yep.
The beauty now is that you don't have to do anything. It automatically works due to the fact that we're using the Azure Identity library, correct?
Correct.
Am I jumping ahead or?
Oh, no, you're not. So that's perfectly right. So I'm just going to change this to a URI now, because it's not a string anymore. And the second parameter here is going to be an instance of, that's the wrong here, an instance of token credentials. So in this case, I'm going to use the Visual Studio Code credential, which instructs Azure Identity to source these credentials from the account that I'm logged in VS Code. So if I compile this application again, I can see that IIS Express is still running in here. So we can see the first one here was Quentin, Violet, Yoshiko. Hopefully when I change this, we're going to see a different list of people. Yay, Anya, Hillary, and Isai. So from our local development machine, we connected to a storage account in Azure without storing any sort of sensitive credentials.
And that's connecting as you, right? Because it's using your CLI credential or whatever credential it fell down to, right? Your Visual Studio Code one. And so that's signed in as you. And then when it comes to deployment time, however, that won't necessarily be you, right?
Exactly. So we're going to deploy this application to Azure. I have an app service that's ready to go, and we'll do the same setup, but for the app service managed identity. This was just to show really that you can use development time focused accounts to do this, but most of the time I guess that when you do dev locally, you're going to want to hit a local emulator or a local SQL database. I've never been in a project where we said, yes, let's use a shared Azure SQL database to do our development, because most of the time it doesn't work nicely. So to make sure that it works in both cases, the first case that was using a connection string and the second case that's now using Aad authentication, what we found is we can have a look at the connection string and see if it's a URI or not. So usually what we do would be something like that. And we would have conditions in the registration to decide how we want to do this.
Yeah.
So we'd say if we can parse this connection string, which might be ill-named because it can be a connection string or it can not be a connection string, but that's how we do it. We call that block service URI. So if we find that the connection string is the proper URI, we then register the block service client with the Azure Identity library. And if it's not, then we'll just assume that it's a usual connection string. So we'll just keep the connection string as is. So this allows me to change from connection string based to Aad authentication without having to make changes in my code. Now, the other bit is right now we're just trying the Visual Studio Code account, which is not going to work when we deploy this application to Azure.
Yeah, so that'll be a hard no, right? You know, try to run it over there.
I don't suspect VS Code is installed on that service with someone being logged in here.
And debugging is a bit of a mess, so I think you have to actually go and dig through the events that are logged in the app service if you're running on app service to figure out what's happening there. Unless you capture the exception, obviously.
The good news is Azure Identity has another implementation that is really just a composite pattern where you can specify multiple sources where account information can be sourced from. Yes. And this one is the chain token credential. And so I could say, you're going to try to get your account information from managed identity first. And if that doesn't work, from VS Code.
So quick question here. Should I use chain token credential or should I go with a default token credential, which good most samples? What would you recommend?
I think as a first step, you might use the default Azure credential, which is really similar to the token the chained token credential, but it uses all of those step by step, one after the other.
Yep.
There might be an issue where someone is logged in Visual Studio, but with the wrong account. And Azure Identity will pick that one up, but then this account won't have access to the storage account, for example. So I think as a starting point, it's really good, but then you need to have a discussion with your development team to say, all right, do we want to align on maybe the development tools that we want to be logged in to sort of restrict the sources of accounts that we want to try. I also suspect you could gain some, I'm not going to say performance, but be a bit more efficient if you know that you're never going to use the Azure CLI or the Visual Studio accounts. Why include them in the process? Same thing when the app is deployed to Azure. If you know you're not going to use the client credentials flow through environment variables, again, there's no reason to try that. So good starting point, but then once you figure out exactly which sources you're going to use, maybe go to the chained token credential and add only the ones that you know you're going to use. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks for clarifying. Because people may be asking, like, when do I use what and why?
Yep. Cool. So I'm going to do the, how can I call that? The best DevOps thing that I've ever done. Right-click publish and publish this application to Azure.
We will take the segment and cut it out from the stream, from the video.
Hide your
we actually publish.
Hide your eyes, children. This is 425 after dark at this point.
Hide the screen. Hide the screen.
I don't like the look of it.
Because we have our cloud advocates that do a lot of DevOps stuff, and if they hear or sniff out that someone is doing right-click publish. In fact, one of our friends is down under, Damien.
Yes. I can't remember his last name. Sorry.
Edwards?
No.
Damien Edwards?
No, Damien Edwards is .NET. Damien...
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, our friend Damien would probably jump on the stream and push the kill switch to do it. But right-click publish is beautiful when you do demos like this.
Exactly.
In real life, don't do it, people. Use DevOps.
Please don't.
Yes.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, what did you... I'm sorry, did you say...
DevOps.
What did you say? Did you say use DevOps? What do you mean? Like DevOps with a lowercase d? Or like the product DevOps?
Sorry, CI/CD.
Oh, okay.
Set up your own CI/CD. I don't care what you use. It can be, GitLab with Atlassian or whatever you want to use, or Azure DevOps or GitHub. But please do not right-click publish. And I've seen people do it in freaking production in real companies. So many stories, so little time. Are we live?
We are.
Is that published?
It is.
Nice.
There's still two things we need to do.
Okay.
The first one is enabled the managed identity for app service, because I didn't do that. At least I don't think I did. Hey, I did, so that's already done. But we now need to do the same thing that we did for my account, that is give this identity read access to the storage account. And just before we do this, I'm also going to show that I pre-configured the settings in here. Forget about SQL, we'll have a look at that later. But you can see that the storage connection string here is the service URI to the blob endpoint and not a connection string. So if I go back to the resource group and the storage account, enabling managed identity for, again, let's use this one here. So enabling managed identity means that the app service now has an identity here in AAD. So I can pick the same storage blob data reader, and the identity is named after the app service. So in this case, it was called Azure Identity Livestream. It shows up here, fantastic. And the Azure portal is also smart enough to not refresh the list of role assignments. So I'm going to do a hard refresh on this.
And while you're doing that, taking a comment from Roberto Bols, who's on the stream, the phrase that he mentioned here about CI/CD, deploying to production should be boring AF. And that's right. You should have a repeatable, reliable process when we're talking about CI/CD, and you should always know what to expect from it. Anything manual should be eliminated from the process. Human error is where most of the engineers tend to, or most of the processes tend to fall apart. I've been there. In fact, I was working for a bank once that had one of our deployments was a Friday night to Saturday morning, because that's when most of the bank customers don't access their bank accounts. And we had to go through a 55-page Word document over WebEx, directing the engineer how to do the deployment, because nothing could be scripted. I mean, it could be scripted, but it was a CRM database in the back end, and oh God, I don't want to, it brings bad memories. But doing that like scenario, sounds bad. And then Saturday morning, we had to retrace our steps over that 55-page document to see where we screwed up. So please, when possible, have a CI/CD process that can do everything reliably for you.
Totally agree. So we now hit the app service here, and hopefully it doesn't work. Fantastic. So why does it not work? Let's have a look at. So what could have I done wrong in here? This looks right to me.
Are we on the right website?
We are, yes, that's definitely the one that I just deployed. I'll have a look at App Insights very quickly, and if it doesn't work, we'll move on to SQL. Apologies for that. You know, NASA landed something on Mars. I failed to
right-click publish their website.
I failed to right-click publish.
Is that maybe that's what they did? Is they did a right-click deploy to deploy the thing to Mars?
Yes.
That would be kind of cool.
So,
I think if we worked at NASA, because everybody's talking earlier about working at NASA and how where we'd actually wanted to work, I think that's what I would call it, is the right-click publish button. That is the launch button.
So it seems that the account that is running that website does not have permissions to the storage account?
It might not have propagated yet. I'll try and make sure that it's here, even though we saw it just before. So it's definitely here. I'll go back to the app service and give it a good old restart, just in case that changes things. Let's try it another. Okay. So I did no changes. Apologies for that. It just took a while, I suppose, for the block service, the storage account, to understand that the managed identity of the app service had in fact access to this one. So we can see by comparing the one that I was running locally and the one that runs in Azure here, they show the same data, which confirms that we are hitting block storage in Azure.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's a great opportunity to showcase how you can use App Insights to troubleshoot scenarios like this, where you expect it to work and doesn't work. Using App Insights to quickly go and look at the error message, at least it points the right direction. So for example, if we hadn't configured the master identity to the right storage account, or as in fact it hadn't propagated yet, we could at least eliminate the problem. So it's not a coding error, it's more likely a permission scenario like we saw before. So
definitely.
I think you did that on purpose.
I didn't.
I don't think it was accidental. I think you had that plan.
I'm not that cheeky. But I totally agree with you, especially with how easy it is to have telemetry and monitoring in ASP.NET Core apps. You add this one NuGet package, you then add this one line in your configure services, and your App Insight just lights up if you have the correct instrumentation key in your app service. So again, really good and easy way to make sure that you have visibility of what's going wrong when your application runs.
And if you have an older app, like this is fantastic because you can add a library to your code and it works. And it's not restricted to .NET, by the way. If you have Java or other solutions, it also works for those. We have the appropriate SDKs. But let's say you had a 10-year-old website that you want to run on Azure, you don't want to change it. In that instance, you would provision App Insights on the app service itself, which would do more or less similar work, although you do lose a little bit of fine-tuning on the errors that you collect. But you don't have to write code for it. You don't have to change your code to add App Insights all the time. Ideally, that's the scenario that you want to follow. So if you are working on a brand new project, that's the right way to do it.
I love App Insights. Absolutely one of my favorite things. In fact, after Thomas was on earlier in the week, and of course he was showing us Azure Monitor and Arc and a bunch of other stuff, I started thinking of like, well, how can I take things like my like the Pi hole and all the different things we got here at the house, like how can I capture those logs and push them up? And in fact, I put the word out on Twitter. I said, hey, I will pay somebody to write a regex for me because they make my eyes bleed. And I'll tell you what, somebody actually did it.
Was
it nice?
Did somebody or did somebody volunteer their time for you?
Volunteered and did it. I swear to God, it was the nicest thing anybody's ever done for me. Probably my entire life was to go and write that.
Who was it? Who was it?
It was. Hang on. It's on Twitter.
It's on Twitter.
I know, but I don't want to mispronounce his name, so that's why I don't want to.
Put the Twitter handle there.
It was. It's Chicken Man. That's who it was. So thanks, Chicken Man.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah. So thanks. So big shout out to Chicken Man. We got to send him. We got to send him something because, I mean, like and even what he sent me back, like it was in like 2 minutes. He's like, oh yeah, we'll just do it like this, and I still have no idea how he did it. Like, I just cannot. My brain just. It's like pushing it through a. It's like pushing it through a cheese grater. I have no idea how to do regexes efficiently. And
hey, there are some people that are fantastic in doing regexes. There are some people that are very good doing OAuth. There are some people that are fantastic at doing low-level hardware and software. So, you know, everyone is a specialist. You don't have to actually know everything all the time. That's why the developer community is so good. We can reach out to other people and help us out.
Yeah. So I was very, very excited about that. Anyway, so now I've got structured logs for DNS queries coming out of Pi-hole. Now the logs are structured and being sent up to Azure Monitor, where I can run queries on it, just like App Insights. But App Insights has always been one of my favorite things because it is so useful and so helpful. So anyway, that's all. We can continue. Cool. Sorry.
No, all good. That's all interesting. Thanks. So before we move on to SQL, a few things to note is that we never interact directly with Azure Identity. The Azure client libraries do that for us. So we just pass an instance of a token credential, and then behind the scenes, the blob service client will fetch a token for us with these credentials, cache this token for us, and also renew the token whenever it's about to expire. So the amount of work here is minimal. And that's super important because as we use Azure Identity outside of the Azure SDK, these are concerns that we'll have to take on in our application code.
Let's not lie, it didn't take any amount of work. It took literally 2 lines of code, line 31 to 33. I want to be super explicit about that because not only have you eliminated all the secrets from the code, but you didn't have to write any code for it, right? It was just a case of setting up the master identity or your local account to speak to the appropriate service on Azure, and that's it, like 2 lines of code. In fact, you could put on 1 line of code if you wanted to be super concise, and it will still work. So it's fantastic how little effort it takes to make your application more secure, and I wish that more people were aware of that. So thank you for showing this.
No problem at all. So the next step for us is to switch where we source data from blob storage to SQL, and that's going to be at first my local SQL instance. So this is boring code because there's not much to it, so I'm going to copy paste things while still explaining how it works. So the first example is going to use Dapper. So Dapper is a micro ORM, and this copy paste is not working for.
And not to be confused with the other Dapper that we have now, which is the microservices Dapper.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. Before too long, you can. Why don't you go use Visual Studio Online from your Surface? And everybody's like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean the big table with like TF service? Or oh no, wait, that's totally different. It's just, it's impossible. I completely give up on Microsoft naming. At least I spelled this Dapper correctly.
It wasn't as funky back then to remove the vowels from your words to make them sound cooler. I wonder what will happen to my name if I just remove all the vowels.
You'd be Christus Miscus. I actually kind of like that. Somebody told us in Discord. Somebody told us in Discord that when you pronounced your name, it was auto-translated to Christ himself. Which I said, look, I said that was got to be a manual override. I'm sure he did that one on his own. Like that was the one caption that he added in on his own.
Machine learning for the win. You know, it only works as efficiently as your data models, and my data models were all about Christ himself.
This should have installed now.
So while you're doing that, Roberto is saying somebody named their kids AWS Snowball Eds.
No, that's what AWS named it. He's saying, I kid you not I named my kids Snowball Eds.
I need more coffee.
But Corey Quinn, when Corey Quinn gets on AWS naming, it's it's like you just pour yourself a drink and sit back and watch Twitter, and I just absolutely love it.
Well, is that gonna be as extreme as Elon Musk naming his child X1 whatever? Like I don't get that. Fun times. Corey's a ginger. You take that back.
Wrong Corey,
Yeah,
AZ Wildfire. That's the wrong Corey. Wrong Corey. Totally different. Not Corey Quinn. Oh wait, well, it doesn't really matter.
Is AZ Wildfire defending all the gingers in the world?
Well, we have a friend of ours he's actually not that ginger. He grew his hair out. Now you're like, oh wait a minute, he had brown hair all this time. We never knew because it was so short before. He just kind of had that very fair. He was very fair, kind of red. We thought, but I don't actually think that our buddy Corey is is actually terribly ginger. But whatever. One of our friends is, so for sure.
Thanks, Hector Cruzette. Yeah, that's gonna trigger JP.
Now the other thing is because now we got people throwing shade about all new projects. They're like, yeah, somebody's gonna build it and then it's just gonna sit there like channel points and never get deployed. So channel points are gonna go out. Channel points are gonna go out like tonight or before the next show. So before the next show, and if they are not out before the next show, then I will do something. I will let you people pick something. Oh no, that's right. Clips. I forgot the clips. Oh no. What am I doing? See, it's late in the day for me and everything's fuzzy. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So anyway, but you know,
our shenanigans are cheeky and fun.
Yeah, I mean his shenanigans are cruel and tragic.
Yeah, it's really just what it comes down to. I have no hope now. I'm gonna end up dressed like a chicken or something for our next show, but that's okay.
Where's our codes, Mickael? How are we doing?
The code is here. I'm struggling to get IAS Express going, but I'll just go through the changes that we've made. We've added a connection string to my local DB instance here, and we've created two classes. One of them is a SQL connection factory. It looks very over-engineered again, but that's because we make some more changes later. That takes a connection string and then creates a SQL connection from that connection string, and then created a Dapper person provider, which implements that same interface as the one we had before. We create a connection from the factory, and we issue the SQL query to the database.
Very
nice. Simple stuff, really. And when I'm pressing Control F5, oh, it works now. Fantastic. And that went again to the other. So I'm going to close this one for now. Refresh. Cool. So we now have yet another list of people, which is good. Now, how do we leverage Aad authentication to connect to SQL?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to use Azure Identity once again to fetch a token, but this one we're going to need to call Azure Identity ourselves because there's no built-in mechanism to work with SQL. So it's going to be similar to what we did here. The one change we're going to have to make is to make these SQL connection factory asynchronous because we want to get the token asynchronously.
Async all the things.
Cool. And so,
and this is
like we did.
This is what I'm kind of curious. This is what I'm kind of curious about is, like, how frequently are you asking for a token?
That's a good question. So with this first implementation, we're going to be asking for a token on every page load, which is obviously not good. And that's something I discovered the hard way. Not the hard way because we had an issue, but the hard way as I looked through the App Insights logs, I thought, but wait, why did we request 10,000 tokens in the last hour? So this is where knowing that when you use Azure Identity in the Azure SDK, all of those concerns are taken care of for you is really important because you want to make sure that you don't make a network request to get a token every time you want to make another network request to get data from SQL.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So Azure Identity handles that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump ahead. That's like the top thing on my mind. Thanks for following Wild Balls 00. I guess maybe that, I don't know.
You have to pronounce that.
I mean, somebody had to say it. I guess I had to. I mean, what was I supposed to say?
Come on. We're going to be so not safe for work from now on. I think we're going to be banned from Microsoft tunnels. Man,
hey, it's
what
you know what?
To us. Thank you.
What's the time? 10 p.m. Isn't that the time you can say whatever on American TV? I mean, it's already so far past 10 p.m. It's
tomorrow.
It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow.
We're on Mickael's time for this stream. This
Friday
is Australian.
Morning.
This is wake up with Australian friends today.
Yes.
Sorry.
So we want to build the same logic here in the sense that we don't want to fetch a token if we are hitting our local SQL database. So again, we're going to build some logic in here to know whether we want a token or we don't. And the logic that we have found that works well in my team is first, do we know that we are connecting to Azure SQL? Mm-hmm. And we check this by knowing if the server name has database.windows.net in it. And the second one is, do we not have a username in the connection string? So I'll just copy this code here because, again, it's not super interesting. And so just going through this, we create the SQL connection the same way we did before. And I'm just going to import the missing using statements. We put that connection string in a connection string builder, and then we check from the builder whether the data source has database.windows.net, which indicates that we connect to Azure SQL, and also if the user ID property is null or empty. The reason we do this with a connection string builder and not ourselves is that SQL Server connection strings have lots of synonyms, or how can I call that, keywords. Mm-hmm. So for the username, you could use user ID or UID, and I think there's a third one. So instead of us baking that logic into our code, we take the extra hit, let's say, of knowing we have a connection string builder, which knows where the user ID can come from which keywords, and then we just analyze this. And if it turns out that we do want to connect to Azure AD and we do not have a username, then we use here Azure Identity ourselves and get a token for this scope. Now, this scope might look very strange. What's this /.default thing? Why do we have 2 slashes at the end?
Did you work that out through pain?
Not really through pain because I knew about it, but if we go back, let's say, to where is the thing that I shared here, Azure Services, so we'll look for Azure SQL. Okay, so this is the resource ID for the Azure SQL application in Azure AD. Mm-hmm. And you can see that it ends with a slash.
Yeah.
Now, the V2 endpoint of AAD, which is not called V2 endpoint, sorry, the Microsoft Identity Platform version has this special scope called /.default when you do a client credentials flow. And hopefully I'm going to land on it directly. No, I don't. /.default.
Oh boy.
Microsoft Identity.
Whoa.
Hey, yeah.
Rated by Lana.
Let's get rated by Lana. Hey, welcome everybody. That's awesome. It was huge.
Good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for coming. We are we're doing SQL and identity in Azure.
Without using any secrets.
Without using any secrets, at least. Yeah, it's got to be good for something, right? Correct. So
we have our friend Mickael from Australia. So thanks everyone for joining.
Hello. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, what were you guys working on over there?
Yeah. Man, look at all these raids in the chat. Love it.
Yeah. It's awesome.
So this obscure string is the concatenation of the resource ID for Azure SQL and the /.default scope, which is a special scope in AAD, which you need to use when you use the Microsoft Identity Platform endpoint, which is what Azure Identity uses behind the scenes. So it looks a bit strange, but yeah, that's the explanation. Cool, so we now have support for AAD authentication. I just need to make one last change here to make sure that we create the connection asynchronously, and I can now deploy that thing again. And before it works, we'll have to do the Azure SQL configuration, which you were mentioning before, JP, sorry.
It's all good. Actually, both of them work, so it's no big deal.
Lucky me.
No judgment.
I have so many wake words I have to listen for. I give up. If anybody talks to my general direction, I'm like, huh? Wait, what? You know? So I'll take it.
Cool.
Thanks for all the follows, friends. Ganit AK just followed, and we had Ian Ray Cart following as well. Thank you.
So I just put a link
for everyone.
Sorry,
yep.
Go ahead.
No, I was talking about the perseverance. People are talking about there was the landing on Lana Stream, which was a great idea. And man, I missed it because I was preparing for this stream, and I had it on the big TV for the kids to watch. Such a monumental event.
Yeah,
they don't really
definitely.
happen. Next one will be people landing on Mars. I'm telling you, it's gonna happen. We're gonna see it. Would you go, Mickael? Would you go?
Don't know. Unless there's a good enough reason for me to leave Earth, I think I'm pretty happy here right now.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, like let's say you were offered with your family to go there to be one of the first, people to immigrate to Mars. Would you guys go on the chat? Would anybody go?
I wouldn't. I'm not that type of person. I let other people take risks, and then if everything's fine, then yeah, maybe.
There's no flag go. Yeah, I'll go. I know. I don't know. I mean, I would probably be one of the first people to go, but I am not sure my family would be keen to follow. Like my wife would probably want to play it safe with the kids. But yeah, I don't mind dying on Mars, just not on impact. That's a very good quote. You know? So many movies about that. I mean, today's live was super exciting.
Yeah.
Where are we? How are we doing with the code? So
I posted the link to the overview of Aad Auth for Azure SQL, and now we're going to take the steps that JP was mentioning before about how can we configure Aad Auth for our managed identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
The prerequisite is to set an Azure SQL Active Directory admin. That's if you don't do that, then I think Azure SQL cannot really talk to Azure AD. So we'll do that. I have created an account just for this. It's called SQL admin, and it's not called SQL admin. Interesting. Azure SQL admin, maybe. Yes, that's the one. If you do this in production, it's recommended to set a group instead of one person. You cannot add multiple principals. It's either one user or one group. So better be safe than sorry and put a group in here so that you can manage membership later if someone ends up leaving or something like that. Now that we did this, as JP mentioned, we don't configure the authorization through our back roles with Azure SQL. We need to connect to the actual database and make the changes from there. So I'm going to connect to this Azure SQL instance, and I will need to do it from the Azure Active Directory admin, because only this account has access to has permissions to add AAD users to the database, if that makes sense.
So do we need to, when you deploy SQL on Azure, do you need to provision it with Azure AD beforehand? Is that something that you cannot change after the fact? Is that correct?
You can do it after the fact. So I created this Azure SQL a few days ago, and only now did I set the AAD admin. I'm pretty sure that you can do that from an ARM template. If you use ARM template to deploy your resources, it's really up to you.
Can you turn off or disable SQL auth at all? Or like, was SQL auth always going to be there, regardless of whether or not you're using Azure AD?
It's a good question. I'm not too sure about that.
Okay. We can check. I was just curious.
I guess there would always need to be one SQL Server admin account, which is there when you create the Azure SQL instance. But maybe after the fact, you can remove it. And it's a good point because you can now do this for storage accounts. I think it's in preview where you can restrict all access to a storage account from an account key or a SAS token. So you can force connections to the storage account to be made through AAD auth only.
Yeah, okay.
So we have this Azure SQL instance here. I hope it's big enough. Can you guys tell me if it is?
It is. It is. If you could zoom in a little, if you could use magnifier or something, that might be helpful. But it is. It's sort of right on the edge.
Yep.
You know, you can also use Azure Data Studio. Have you tried that?
I did, and I have to say I didn't like it at all.
Love it. Love it.
I mean,
that's amazing feedback. Why?
Imagine the PC you'd have to run that many Electron apps at once. I mean...
True. Did you run out of memory?
It just moved my cheese too much from SSMS, which is really Stockholm Syndrome, because that thing is so damn slow. But, you know, I'm just used to it.
I remember when you used to have to install SSMS, and it was always the version behind a Visual Studio, and I was like, oh my god. So I'd end up with 48 gigs of Visual Studio shell installations, and just because I needed to access SQL, and I like Data Studio because I don't have to do that, but that's kind of it. I mean, I don't know, like I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great tool. The concept behind it, you know, the fact that it's cross-platform, runs everywhere, but as you say, it has its drawbacks.
I mean, I'll use it over installing SSMS. How about that? I just flattened my machine back in December, and it's mid-February. I have no Visual Studio, and I have no SSMS.
Studio, no SSMS, no SQL Server running locally. If I have to run SQL Server, I'll do a container.
I do have local DB. But that's because I needed it because I didn't know about Azure Right, and so that's why. So if I'd known about Azure Right, I would have done that first. But you know, you gotta work with what you got. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess we could also do SQL in Visual Studio. Now do the SQL tools in Visual Studio? I wonder, do they support
SQL in the backend?
Well, no, they don't. No, they don't. You can connect to SQL in Visual Studio, but I don't know if you can connect to SQL in Visual Studio with Azure AD off to SQL Azure. I don't know if that works.
Ooh,
I've never tried that.
Right.
I doubt it.
Yeah. I just don't know. I don't know. Something to chase down and figure out.
So we are here connected with our Azure AD admin for Azure SQL to our database. And so the first two lines here is how we add AAD users to this database. And the interesting bit here is the from external provider, how can I call this, suffix. This tells Azure SQL to go get these users or this principal from AAD. So again, this one is named after the app service, because this is what the managed identity will be named after, and this one is just my account. I don't know if we're going to do it from my account, but let's just do that right now. All right, so it looks like I did this one already when I was preparing things, so let's forget about that one. So now Azure, this database specifically knows about these two users. And now, like you would do with SQL principles, we need to assign them roles. Because this application is only reading data from the database, I'll just add both of them to the DB data reader role. I'll now just show you that we do have, in fact, data in this table. See, that's the thing. When you interact with an Azure SQL instance in SSMS, you right-click, you go grab a cup of tea, and you come back to see the pop-up menu.
Wait a minute, is your SQL instance running on your local data center, or is it provisioned somewhere else?
No, that's, yeah, it's the closest that I have.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes that can be the problem, right? Because you're managing something too far out. However, good to know.
So we can see the three first names here: London Little, Kelly Chris, and Imogen Idiart, just to make sure that we have the right ones. So we deploy the application to app service. I'll just show that the app service is already configured with the right connection string.
I would imagine too, I mean, since this is just a normal SQL user at this point, things like row level security, all that kind of stuff, that would also be applicable here. Schema access, right? I mean, we can treat these users essentially just like any other user. They just happen to be authenticated externally.
Yes, correct.
Which is perfect, because that's what you want when you have to provision access to databases. Lock down permissions to just the right level.
And so the connection string here, that's what's interesting. So we do connect to this instance, to this database, but then we have no credentials at all. This is just saying, make sure you encrypt the connection and don't blindly trust the certificate that Azure SQL presents to us. So we make sure that we validate the certificate, but there's no username, no password, nothing. So I'm going to cross my fingers below the table. That's my local one, which I don't want.
Let's cross our fingers.
Yippee! So once again, our application connected to an external service, in this case Azure SQL, by using Aad Auth and holding no credentials at all.
Love it.
Now, I'm just going to make a few requests here. I don't know if we'll have time to go to App Insights, but as we discussed before, every time I make a request, every time I press F5, the code uses Azure Identity to fetch a new token from the managed identity endpoint, which is far from ideal and efficient. So this is where, when we use Azure Identity ourselves, we need to take a lot more concerns on our shoulders than when we use it through the Azure SDK.
Yep.
So we do that quickly. And once again, it's not specifically interesting code. So I'm going to steal it from my existing GitHub repository, which I will make public at the end of the stream, by the way. I'll just want to double check a few things, because that missing NuGet package at first tripped me up big time. So I'll definitely want to have a look at that.
And the nice thing about the uninteresting code is that it's only a few lines of code that allow you to do all the stuff, right? All the stuff,
correct,
especially the secure stuff.
I do have one quick question while you're getting this set up. So Azure Identities, it has support for user managed identities too, right?
It does now, yes. I've never used them, so I can't talk too much about them. The only thing that I know is that you need to pass, I think, the client ID, which is linked to the user assigned managed identity. But yes, it does have support for it now.
And the reason why you need to pass the client ID, as I learned the hard way, is that even if you just have one client user-assigned identity, the assumption is that you could have multiple on that same service, and for that reason, you need to be explicit about which one you want to use. But it's exactly the same. That. Yeah, you can assign multiple user-defined master identities to a service. That's the whole point. And because of that, Azure Identity gets its knickers in a twist and goes like, I don't know which one to use, and it fails. And it's a very random error message. So I'd advise if you're going to use, and I actually prefer user-assigned identities over master identities, or system-assigned ones.
See, I like system ones, because system ones, when I delete the resource, it's gone. I'm done. I don't have to worry about it. But a user-assigned one shows up as a resource in Azure. And of course, you can delete it independently. You can deploy it in a resource group, whatever, and then assign it to various resources. But I think the thing too, and we didn't really talk about this much today, because I know we've talked about it a lot in the past, is like managed identity is one of those things that you don't realize how awesome it is until you've had to do it the other way. And the other way, of course, is you've got to create a service principal, and now you've got a credential you have to manage. And that credential, it's going to expire in 1 year, and that's 1 year from February 18th at 5:44 p.m., right? Like, it's not a matter of I want my secret to expire at exactly this time so we can put a bunch of process around it. It ends up being, this super specific time, and you've got a secret you got to manage. You have to put it somewhere. And with managed identity, either system or user assigned, you don't manage the credential at all. You just ask from certain resources, hey, I want a token for resource XYZ. I need to connect to Azure SQL. I need to connect to Azure Storage. And you get a token that your app can use. And then the Azure Identity Library abstracts that away even further to where you don't really necessarily have to know anything about the mechanics of how that's happening, just that it is happening. So it's, I don't know, like managed identity is just like a hidden gem. And recently, as of I think Azure Identity 1.3, it now works with Azure Arc, which means you can use this in AWS, you can use it in GCP, you can use it on-prem if you wanted to, and it also works in stuff like Service Fabric. So you got a Service Fabric cluster sitting somewhere, you can use that too. So it's pretty cool. Like it's just one of those great tools that you can use for almost anything. And it comes in handy like just all the time. It's just one of my favorite things. Like we've done CI/CD pipelines in GitHub with GitHub Actions, and in Azure DevOps doing the same thing with no credentials to do Azure deployments. And it's right up there as one of my favorite tools. So that's all. Commentary over.
Cool.
Partially because it looks like Mickael is there.
I'll go through the changes that we made quickly. Yes. So we took the code that fetches the token, we attach it to, sorry, that must be something else. I see my DS is playing strange again. Anywho, we took the code that gets the token to attach it to the SQL connection outside. We created an abstraction for that called Azure SQL Token Provider. I like really long names. Please don't blame me for that.
No judgment. No judgment.
We have the base implementation, which does really what we were doing before in the SQL connection factory. And to take care of caching, we introduced this decorator that takes another instance of Azure SQL Token Provider and looks in an in-memory cache if we already have a token, and if we don't, it then delegates to the other one. The way we register this in the container, the built-in dependency injection container for Microsoft extension dependency injection doesn't support decoration, so we included this Cruta NuGet package, which does two things. One of them is assembly scanning, which is really powerful, but we're not using it now. And the other one is decoration. So having a look at how it's all set up now, we add the in-memory cache because that's where we are going to store our tokens. We then register our base implementation of Azure SQL Token Provider, which uses Azure Identity. And on top of that, we register a decorator that's going to use our cache layer, so to speak. And then we just add this SQL token provider to the SQL connection factory, if that makes sense.
We need to start over because our friend...
Bald bearded builder has arrived with his group, and he's he usually gives us a hard time about literally everything. And he said we have to start over because now that he's arrived, now that he and his posse have arrived, we have to start the whole thing over. So I hope you're ready. I hope you're ready, Mickael. I hope you didn't have any actual work. The advantage, though, is that for you, I mean, you're what?
Perseverance landed on Mars. That was great.
Let's start all over again. Let's talk about Mars and .NET 6.
Hey, put your Mac back in the box. You can unbox it again. I mean, you know,
we did an unboxing earlier on.
I mean, but for Mickael, you're what, 18 hours? You're what, 18 hours ahead of us? 13 hours ahead of us. I mean,
I'm plus 11 UTC plus 11. So I don't know how many minuses you are.
I think Mickael is gonna have deja vu nightmares from now on, where he's like repeats this stream over and over and over again.
No, but I mean, so that means it's like when you pause the TV for a UTC 11 plus. For me, that's 5. That's 16 hours. So you've got 16 hours we have to make up here. So I mean, you know, we could always figure that part out.
Mickael is throwing shade. He's got. Don't tell us. You got a special announcement today that we won't hear about.
See, it's already starting. It's all downhill from here. See?
Oh God!
Oh man!
You know what? Maybe we should just retire. You know, we picked. That's it. It's time to retire.
There's literally no hope for us anymore.
Yeah. So where are we with the code, Mickael? How are we doing?
So we now introduce token caching in our application, we're going to deploy that to Azure, make a few requests, and hopefully I'll be able to show the difference between before, where every time we made a request, we were fetching the token with Azure Identity, and after, where we hopefully make only one request, and then the subsequent ones use the cached token. So this is the one.
We're publishing to Azure now, so technically if we refresh, we should see what we are supposed to see, right?
Yep, so nothing has changed from the UI perspective. We still fetch the same data. However, in the background, we're not making as many token acquisition requests than before.
Nice.
And I'm not too sure how easily it's going to be for me to prove that this works. But we'll have a look.
We believe you. How about that?
No. I mean,
always take some time.
The SQL tracing and stuff, though, like dependency mapping in App Insights is awesome. I mean, I love it. It's one of my favorite parts of it to see, because I would imagine that call to go get tokens. Yeah, I mean that's a long call, right?
Ooh, that's a good one. Domel says check the non-interactive sign-in logs on Azure AD, I guess.
Oh yeah,
Sorry, can you say again?
Yeah.
The non-interactive sign-in logs in Azure AD. I don't even know where those are.
They're not really sign-in logs in the sense that we're just hitting the MSI endpoint. We're not authenticating with AAD per se, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, that's a good question, though, because we would probably be able to figure out, is MSI doing any caching on its own, right? I mean, because we're making a call to MSI. MSI is getting a token issued via Azure AD, just doing the work for you. I'd be curious with the
MSI tokens will be in there too. So should we jump to Azure AD and try to figure it out?
We can. Another note is, yes, MSI does cache tokens for up to 8 hours.
Okay.
Yep. So it means if we get a token every time, we still need to hit that endpoint, which takes apparently about 500 milliseconds, which is not
pretty slow. Well, certainly not for every SQL query, too. You know.
Exactly.
So let's have a look at those. When did we do that? Let's try and take this very small portion here. Yes, that was a while ago. So hopefully we can see somewhere in the dependencies.
There's a good question from Roberta Bowles. Does reducing token requests also maybe reduce cost of red flagging alerts? And that means that if you have a crap ton of requests for tokens, that seems fishy. Whereas if you don't have them,
yeah, I don't know if there are any. That's a good point.
Maybe we should do a deep dive about MSI with some of our IT friends.
Maybe through the logs directly, we can see them. Let's try that.
I think we just need to get Daniel on here, because he'll insult everybody for 2 hours, and it'll be wildly entertaining. I'll be able to use every sound effect on the planet.
For the lack of knowledge. How about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he'd be all over us. He's being so nice to us in the chat, too. Like it's like if he was actually... See what I mean? We're going to have to allow this. It says...
No, I denied it.
Why did you block it? You should let it go. It's bleeped. It says
kids may be watching.
Yeah, but kids aren't reading the chat.
Are you sure?
Not to mention,
they leave for the chat.
I mean, I don't know that. I mean, based on it's FU***K. I don't know that many 5-letter swear words that start with F. So it's like fire truck. I don't know. But it's like a shortened fire truck, maybe. But anyway.
Right, so we have our proof here. We can see that at 10:41 p.m. UTC. I'll just switch to local time to freak you out.
That's the future.
9:41, I pressed F1 a few times. I pressed F5 a few times, and we can see that we made a request to the MSI endpoint a few times, right? Like every time I was praying F5. Then 5 minutes ago, I also pressed F5 a few times, but we only made one request to the token endpoint, which means that we are successfully caching the tokens and preventing our apps from making unnecessary network calls, which is always a good thing.
Yes.
Cool. How are we going for time? Because there's another section. It's going to be pretty quick, I hope, but I don't want to go
5 minutes. So if
go ahead.
So in 5 minutes, then I mean,
we're not.
I'll be able
it's
to,
just.
But I'll just.
Yeah, I mean it's fine. It's fine either way. It's just us today, so.
That's good.
Time is.
We're not on
time is. It's up to your time. It's up to you, Mickael, because your time is.
Oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm good, thank you. I'll just talk through what I want to show, and if we need to stop at any time, please let me know. There's always a blog post where this is covered anyway, so people will be able to refer to that. So by using Dapper, which is a micro ORM, we have complete control over the creation and the disposal of the SQL connection instances, which means that we also have complete control as to when we attach the token to it. Now, when you use a more fully fledged ORM like EF Core internally manages the SQL connections and creates them and disposes them. So by default, you don't really have any way to attach the token before EF Core sends the request to SQL, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Because it sounded a bit confusing.
What I heard was don't use EF Core. Was that what I was supposed to take away from that? Oh, sorry.
Because then we would stop the show straight away, and we don't want that.
Okay.
There's a way that you can use EF Core and Aad Auth together in a hopefully nice way. So again, some boring code, so you can have a chat while I'm struggling to copy paste code from my GitHub repository.
Okay, good. Well, so
go for it.
My dinner has arrived, which I'm excited about because I've been on this diet, this low sodium diet, which is absolutely miserable because anything delicious has sodium in it. I was at the doctor today, and she's like, well, she's like, do you like hummus? And I was like, yeah, when you're eating it with like a delicious salty chip. I mean, what else do you dip in hummus? And she was like, I don't know,
cucumber.
I'm like, I
carrots.
guess, like my
Celery.
finger, like I mean, I don't know. So,
That's
I don't know, like
recommendation from Daniel. Replace sodium with fat.
Well, so anyway, it's actually gone really well. So I'll say this, and I know that nobody cares, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I started this diet about 3 weeks ago, and I haven't been like hardcore about it. Like I've been monitoring it, of course, and trying to like really not eat salty stuff. But I've lost 7 pounds. 7 pounds in 3.5 weeks. So my hope is
because you're young, my friend. I can't lose any weight whatsoever. So screw that.
Well, but I mean, but what do you? But you don't even need to lose weight. Like, I mean, you're like grabbing enormous weights and like throwing them around your garage and stuff like that. Like, I can't do that. What weight do you even need to lose? I don't know. Anyway.
Oh, dude, I've got lots of flab here in my dad belly. So
that's okay. We'll take your word for it. Like, we don't need a. I don't need a visual, but I'm just saying. You know, like
I'm lifting it now. It's happening. Right, cover your eyes.
Oh man, so Roberta Bulls wants it. He wants a visual.
I'll send you a DM. I'll send you a DM, Roberta Bulls, if you insist.
So I don't know. Was AZ Wildfire here earlier when 45 show after dark? That's so true. we've hit it, and it's not nearly as exciting as we thought it was going to be.
Dude, it's way past midnight. It's next morning now. We're up.
Yeah, I mean it's literally 9:19 a.m. where where Mickael is. It's almost 10 a.m. So
yes, correct.
Like, I mean, he's seen the future, and from what he told us earlier, it's not very good. He said it's going to be surprising. So, yes, this is definitely the weirdest OnlyFans ever. Yes, absolutely.
And we're not making a penny out of that. I mean, that's awful.
When I live in the South, where literally every room in your house has a fan, and like has a ceiling fan, like almost every single house. Every single house does.
You're talking about the right OnlyFans.
Oh, wait a minute. Wrong one. Oops.
Who can educate JP on OnlyFans, please?
Oh no!
I don't want
please,
to be the one.
I don't want anybody. I don't want anybody who we associate with educating me on OnlyFans. That's going to be a whole new.
Phone number. It's 800 AZ.
We do have a phone number. I will check. We got to get that working too. I mean, Bolt was throwing some serious shade. He was throwing some serious shade earlier. So I committed to getting channel points deployed before tomorrow morning's show. Which, actually, you know what? Mickael could tell us if we have it deployed because it's almost 10 a.m. I mean, by 11 a.m. his time, we'll be live again, right? So, I mean...
It's all going to work fine.
Yeah. So we already have the number. It's 877 Azure AD. You can actually call that number. 877 Azure AD. You can actually call that number right now. But
we won't put you on the show yet.
We won't put you on the show yet, but my cell phone will start buzzing across the room. And if you think I'm kidding, somebody call it 877 Azure AD. We need one of those things that blinks at the bottom like an old infomercial. Call now.
Wait, it's Azure AD, isn't it? Not AZ. It's Azure AD.
It's 877 AZUREAD. And I'll even hold this up so you can see. If somebody's going to call it, you'll see it go off in a minute. In fact, not only do we have a jingle for it, we actually have a voice actor who recorded the intro. So, I mean, it's the real deal. I just had to figure out how to put us all on enough of a delay that it doesn't get royally offensive when somebody calls in and wants to be clever. What? I actually got a call on it the other day. What do you mean it didn't work? Oh no, if it didn't work, maybe I didn't pay the bill. I got to go back and check. I thought I did. I think you're supposed. Oh, you know why? Because it's not. Because the show isn't technically live.
We're excited to hear from you. Stay on the line, and you'll be connected shortly.
There you go.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
So, I think it's because it's 6 p.m. I have it set to do not disturb, so it's just kind of. It's just dumping into the abyss. But you know what? Call it tomorrow. Call it tomorrow.
Yeah, call us tomorrow morning.
And yeah, I don't have an international version. I don't know, like, what's the international... Oh, wait, look. Somebody's calling.
001 877.
Now it's gone. Whoever called... Whoever called...
Is that not accessible?
Whoever called hung up.
Is that not accessible from outside the US if you call 877 numbers?
No, I'm sure it works. I just think you'd pay an arm and a leg for it.
Yeah.
Oh,
forget about writing code. Let's talk about...
Daniel left a voicemail. Should we play it?
Oh, I don't know. Is it... he's got,
See, look.
a winky face over there.
See, look at that. Right there.
Uh-huh.
See? 877. That's not in focus, but whatever. You get the idea. So, that's true, Bolt. Call from Teams. I mean, Christos moved here from the UK, and whenever he sets up a meeting, the dial-in numbers are in the UK. See? Look, there it is, right there. Somebody's calling. I'm going to answer it. We're going to see who it is. Hello?
Grasshopper, call for extension 0 to accept. Press 1 to send the voicemail.
Hello? Hello?
Hey, it's Robert Tables.
Hey! What's up?
That is so meta.
Oh my God!
I think you need a QR code.
Oh, I gotta hang up. I just got this call from somebody absolutely harassing me, talking about QR codes. Can you believe that? Who would do such a thing? Who would do such a thing? Okay,
sure
sorry.
Mac Mini has a QR code somewhere. I'll find it.
Yeah, that's I definitely need the got 'em. I need the got 'em sound effect right now for sure. Got 'em.
Yeah, it does have a Microsoft tag. It doesn't have a QR code, but no QR code on this one. Just plain barcodes.
Sorry, Mickael. Okay.
Disappointing.
Sorry. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Yes. Yes.
Sorry.
So the boring code was switching from Dapper to EF Core. So quickly go through the changes. We created this Db context here that sources data from the same table that we were getting it from with Dapper. And we created this yet another implementation of iPerson provider that uses the live stream context, which is the Db context. Mm-hmm. And then in the startup file, we just get the connection string and tell EF Core to use SQL Server. Now, if I run this locally, this is my local here, this works fine because I have a SQL connection string with username and password or Windows authentication. If I deploy this to Azure now, it's not going to work because we haven't hooked up Aad Auth. And as I was saying before, because we're not in control of the SQL connections that is taken care of by EF Core, we need to find a way to hook into EF Core to say, hey, give me some event that I can use to attach the token if I need to. And the way we're going to do this is by leveraging EF Core interceptors. I'm going to put the link.
It's not built in? Wow.
It's not built in yet. There's an issue on the EF Core repo to do this, but for now it's not. Last I checked, it wasn't.
I'm going to have a talk with one of the PMs. That's unacceptable.
So interceptors can act at different levels. They can act at the command that you're sending to SQL, or they can act on the connection that EF Core is using. And so this is the one that we want. We want to hook into the lifecycle of the connection so that we can, if needed, get a token and put it and attach it to the connection. So what we'll do is implement one of those interceptors. It's not super interesting, but I guess I won't type everything, but it might be the most interesting of the boring part. So let's do it together.
So for people that don't know about this, interceptors are pieces of code that run before or after EF executes, correct?
Can you say again? Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
No, it's fine. I'm saying interceptors are extension methods for EF Core so that you can execute custom code before or after something happens in SQL, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, in EF Core against SQL or whatever else you're using EF Core for.
Yep, That's totally right. So, yep, go ahead.
And there are different kinds of interceptors too, correct?
Yes. So this one here is the one that can interact with the underlying connection, but we also have, I think, Db Command Interceptor, which can potentially, I don't know, change the query that you're actually sending to SQL.
Or you can log stuff. Like you might want to log your query before it goes out.
Yep,
I think that's
exactly.
a handy way to do it.
And there's a third one, but I can't remember what it is. I put the link in the Twitch chat. I think the different types would be explained there. So if we have a look at what the Db Connection Interceptor gives us, we can see that there are two virtual methods, connection opening and connection opening async, which get called by EF Core internally just before the connection is open. So this is a great way for us to hook into our, do we need a token? If yes, fetch a token and attach it to the connection. And so we'll have to override both. And I'm going to explain why in a second. And again, I learned these the hard way. The reason there's both a synchronous version here and an asynchronous version is that EF Core will call different ones depending on how you interact with EF Core. So here I'm calling an async version, an async method on the DB set. So in this case, it's going to call the connection opening async method of the interceptor. If I was using the toList method, the synchronous version, it would then call the synchronous method of the interceptor. For the sake of saving time, because I'm already over time, I'm just going to do the asynchronous version because that's the only way we interact with EF Core. But please remember that you need to override both unless you know for sure that you're not using any synchronous ones. So we just get this in, create the constructor. And so then it's really the same implementation as the one we were doing in the in where was this now? In here, sorry, in the SQL connection factory. But now we move this method to the interceptor. So we only get the DB connection here, which is like the, I'm going to say the common implementation of all DB connections. We know for a fact that this is going to be an instance of SQL connection, so we can cast this as we like. And then it's really going to be that same logic here. So do we connect to Azure? Yes, not connection string, sorry. That's going to be SQL connection string. Do we connect to Azure and we don't have any credentials? Yes, in this case, grab the token from the provider here, which again has caching implemented in it right now. And we'll return whatever it's returning by default. So connection, event data, result, and cancellation token.
And then two, I guess, because you could have different kinds of connections in EF, you could use this for other places where you're getting entities, right? Other data sources like an API or something like that, right?
Yep.
Although maybe there's a better way to do it. I don't know.
Can you say that again?
Well, so like if I've got a different kind of data source that isn't SQL specifically, right? Like we're casting the connection to SQL connection because we know it's SQL because we're talking to a database. Yep. But if I've got other data sources that are not SQL, and I haven't used EF in a while, so like I could be totally talking out of, well, I'm usually talking out of my ass, but for EF specifically, you can capture other data sources, right? Or you can talk to other data sources. It doesn't have to be SQL. It could be something totally different. And I'm wondering if this is the same kind of pattern I would use if one of my data sources was, say, something like an API or something, right?
Does it not? Is not EF? I think supports a limited number, not limited, a defined number of data sources. I don't know if you can do it.
Oh, okay. I thought at one point, maybe I'm thinking of the old EF, like pre-EF Core. I seem to remember you could call like WCF and stuff like that, but maybe I'm misremembering too.
Okay, yeah, I can't remember that happening. You're right in the sense that right now we know we connect only to SQL Server, so we can safely cast this connection. If we had EF Core connect to SQL Server, but also Postgres and something else, we would need to be a bit more defensive here to say, hey, is this connection actually an instance of SQL connection? Then yes, we can do this. If it's a Postgres, then we might do something else or do nothing at all. Was that your question?
Yeah. No, that was. I mean, this is essentially, this is your chance to do any sort of connection modification you need to in order to connect successfully. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, there are SQLite, SQL Server, Azure SQL, PostgreSQL, MySQL, MariaDB, and then there are paid for connectors as well, like SQLite 3, Oracle, Oracle DB, DB2, Teradata, and what have you. So it means that it is extensible. In fact, you can also write your own database provider. So technically, you could treat an API as a database provider and write your own database provider for that, but I think that takes too much effort rather than doing HTTP calls directly, isn't it?
I think it was.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Well, I was thinking more. I was thinking of the older, like the full framework EF, where full framework EF you could do REST APIs and stuff with WCF and all that sort of thing, SharePoint, all that kind of stuff. Like you could build an entity model from a WCF service, and in thinking about it, I think this would kind of be like this. And since those didn't get pulled over anyway into EF Core, maybe it's a moot point. I seem to remember writing WCF interceptors a very, very long time ago to do Azure AD with WCF, but I could see how this same pattern would be used if if another data source comes online and it uses Azure AD or some kind of token-based auth, we could follow the same pattern by using an interceptor to make sure that gets added. In fact, I almost wonder, like, this could be, I think this would be fairly easy to implement in terms, not easy to implement per se, but as like part of the builder here, right? Like add db context dot add, add Azure AD authentication or whatever, right? And you just wire up those interceptors as part of like a builder.
With an extension method?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So our interceptor here, it's all ready, but we need to register it in a sense with EF Core. And because it's got here a dependency that's coming from the DI container, we can't just go use SQL Server, but also, and that's the method you use, add interceptors. If I try to add here my Azure AD Authentication Db Connection Interceptor, I need to provide an instance of my token provider, which I don't have right now, because I'm just configuring the EF Core context builder.
There's a question, Mickael. What does the decorate services that decorate do exactly?
Yep. So if you're not familiar with the decorator pattern, it's a pattern where you have a class that implements an abstraction, and this class sort of wraps another implementation of this abstraction. So it's not built in the DI container from Microsoft. This is coming from this NuGet package here, Scrutor. And so what it does is it's going to look at which implementation we have against this interface and sort of replace it with that new implementation. But the one that's going to be injected here is going to be our original implementation. So the way it's now going to work when we call Azure SQL Token Provider get access token async is we're first going to have a look if we have a token in the cache. And if we don't, we're going to delegate that action to our inner SQL token provider, which is the one based on Azure Identity. And so the good thing, what I like about the decorator pattern is that it separates concerns. So I have my, I'm going to call it core Azure SQL token provider that just does one thing, which is get a token with Azure Identity, and I can extend the behavior by using the decorator pattern and adding a layer of caching on top of that. And that makes for greater testability as well, because if I want to test that my caching provider works well, I can potentially just mock this one and make sure that when there is not a token in the cache, then my mock is being called with whatever parameters it is supposed to be called.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love it. Absolutely love it. I mean, if I could count on one hand, like, or if I could count like all of the providers I have that are just, okay, do this, check my cache, do I have it? If I don't, then go and get it itself. Like, doing it this way is so much cleaner. So I really like it.
Cool. So, because we can't new up an instance of our interceptor here, what we're going to do is register it first in the container as itself, and then use the overload of add_db context, which gives us access to the already built container. And so now we can do provider.getRequiredService.
Okay, cool.
That's a bit sneaky. I thought this wouldn't work at first, but what I realized is that this lambda expression here, or this callback, is called every time the DB context is created. And by default, the DB context is created once every request, which means this thing here, which also be called once every request, meaning that your interceptor could have dependencies that are registered as scoped, and it would still work nicely. You wouldn't have lifetime issues. In our case, we don't need that because the memory cache is a singleton in our application, and all the other dependencies are singletons as well.
Very nice.
Cool. All right.
So if I now deploy this once again, and if we have, we'll see. You let me know if I push it too far, just to show exactly how the caching works. I can run this locally, targeting the Azure SQL instance, put a few breakpoints here and there to see when things are being called. But if we don't have time, please let me know. I don't want to hold you too long.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
It's the other way around.
Yeah. We're here on your whims. We will bend to yours, no sweat.
Do you know what a hammer is?
Okay, so I haven't refreshed this yet. So this is still showing the earlier version where we were using Dapper. If I press Control F5, we can see that it's now the EF core person provider that gets the data. It's the same data because we get it from the same Azure SQL instance, but we managed to integrate Aad Auth to Azure SQL within EF core. And that's pretty much it at this point. I'll just have a look at my links, see if I have anything else. And if not, I'll just take maybe 10 more minutes to show you, to put a few breakpoints, run this locally, and see how things work together. Cool, so I'm going to change this connection string here, and I can't really be bothered to type it again here. Configuration. I'll just grab that and put it in here. Cool. So if I now run this locally again, it's going to use the account that I'm logged in VS Code to try to authenticate with AAD. And that's because in the SQL token provider, we've registered two, I'm going to call them providers again, one for managed identity, which won't work because I'm not running this in Azure, and one from VS Code. And if you remember, it should work because back when we were in SSMS here, I had already registered my personal account in this Azure SQL database, and I made myself a reader for this database. So let's close everything here and make a few and put a few breakpoints. So I'm going to put one here, another one on this line specifically, one in the Azure Identity one, and one in the Interceptor. And press F5 and see how we go. Please work.
This should, I mean, if this does, obviously it's going to work, I'm not saying it's not, but like, I mean, this needs to ship with it, right? I mean, like,
yes,
because it's just so like, I don't see a future where you would just say, well, you got to get token on your own. Like, I don't know, and figure out how to get tokens on your own. Like this just feels like something that would be so just like obvious to be available, especially for people who are using Azure.
I think we know the people that work on the EF team. We can definitely have a chat to see where we are and whether we can prioritize, because we talk about managed identity to all the developers that we come across, and ideally we don't want anyone to be using secrets or hard-coded credentials to anything. If we can get EF core developers to do that as well, that would be great. We can do it today. It just takes a little bit of effort.
And you've got this out in GitHub and stuff, right?
Yep. Yes, I wrote the guest blog post on the Azure SDK blog, which goes through this, and I'll also make the Git repository that has this very solution that I'm showing here public later today, after making a few changes, as I mentioned.
Okay, cool.
Do you say you have a guest blog post on the dev blogs?
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
I remember reading that one because I remember somebody asking the question of. I remember somebody asking the question. It was back in October, I think, right?
I'll do a bit of self-promotion and post that in the chat.
That's the whole point, my friend. That's why I asked.
Thank you.
All of your links seem to have periods at the end, by the way. I don't know why.
Oh, yeah, that's how I put them in the Markdown file. But in GitHub, GitHub was smart enough to put it as a true period and not a period as part of the link. Damn, I'm so angry now. All of those links will not work.
No, that's okay. Actually, your current one just did, so that's good.
Okay. Cool. So we are in the Interceptor now. We inspect the SQL connection. We do want to connect to, and that's not yet. So this is really small. So we do connect to Azure SQL, and we do not have credentials in the connection string. So we call our token provider. The first one we hit is the decorator, the cache token provider. And because it's the first time we hit that, we're not going to get anything from the cache. So we execute the callback that allows us to get the data and define how long it's going to be cached. So now we just jumped into the lowest level implementation, where we use Azure Identity to fetch a token, again, using the account that I'm logged in with VS Code. This worked fine. So we're going to jump back to the cache token provider. We specify that this entry, so this token, should expire when Azure Identity tells us it needs to expire, and then return the whole thing to the EF Core Interceptor. I don't know why debugging is so slow. My machine is usually much faster than this. So now that we have the token, and again, just before EF Core opens the connection, we attach the token to the SQL connection. And at this point, I can just press F5, and hopefully we'll see the data coming through. Cool.
Okay,
so that's
cool, okay.
My machine connecting to an Azure SQL instance. If I press F5 again, the same thing is going to happen. So I'll just press F5, I won't go step by step, except now we do have something in the cache. So instead of jumping on line 25 to ask the Azure Identity token provider to get one for us, we just get one from the cache and give it back to the interceptor.
Nice.
And we see the data coming through again.
Well, I'd be curious too, like if you were to run like performance tests or something against this, like what's that tax you pay up front versus, because this is a singleton, so it's available it's going to be available app wide, right? Good, like it's a memory cache too.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I love it.
Thanks. And that's pretty much it for me.
Fantastic.
I'll keep the camera here just in case we have questions and I need to go in the code again, which is why my head looks weird on the screen. But if there's no questions, I guess I'll just move the camera here. And I don't know how it works at the end of the show. Do we do a bit of talking or do you just press stop?
We usually, I mean, we've certainly talked plenty. I mean, I'm sure we've hit word quota, but yeah, that's fine. I mean, no, this was awesome. I love it. I think this is awesome. Like, because we don't cover a whole lot of SQL, and so I think it's very cool to see, and it's very cool to see that things like caching and performance are handled, because I know that was some of the like early concern was like, well, we need an access token on every request to SQL, and that could that's going to potentially add a lot of round trips. So that I love it, and the decorator, being able to use the decorator pattern with that library like that is super cool. I think it's like I've never seen that. I've never seen it before, and it looks awesome. I love it. So no, this has been great.
So for now,
we have a visitor.
every code that JP writes is going to have a decorator pattern.
What's its name? Was that a cat? I saw the top of a cat.
Yeah, it was a cat. Sorry, I thought
Skip.
Skip. So we have and that's a bad joke because it's actually not the reason why he's called Skip. But there's a detergent brand in France, which was called Skip, and their motto was, Skip is going to wash your clothes and make them whiter than white. So given this guy here is pretty much Snow White, we thought we would call him Skip.
That's awesome. Yeah, Bolt says you should never apologize for a cat. That's very true. So, I agree. You should apologize for a dog. When your dog jumps all over people and you take it to the grocery store in a shopping cart, you should definitely apologize for that, but you should never apologize for a cat.
Oh. And I'm afraid my second coworker is going to be jealous, so I'm just going to show her for a while.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. She's making sure the decorator pattern is applied successfully.
That's awesome. I have to keep the door closed because I have three coworkers who would blow in here all day long if I didn't. So that's awesome. Well, cool. Well,
that's been fantastic. Thank you. For
thanks for coming. Thanks for showing us all your stuff too. This was killer. I love it. And we've got the blog post in the chat. We'll make sure it gets on make sure it gets on our blog post afterward. Any links or anything to the code and stuff, we'll make sure that gets published. We'll have a video up of this soon. In other news, we are back in about 16 hours, 15 hours.
That's right. That's
so we'll be back. We'll be back when it's Friday morning for us, provided we're still here, because Mickael won't tell us our fate over the next 16 hours. But
he knows the future.
We'll be back tomorrow morning. I think it's nobody's going to be with us tomorrow morning. It's just going to be Christos and I, and we're going to be
just the two of us.
We're going to be writing some code.
You need the sound for that, man. I don't want to sing it myself. You need the actual song.
I don't want you to sing it either, but I'd worry that the copyright police would come after us. So what can you do?
It's just a phrase. Seriously, they can't do anything for a phrase, can they? What's the limit?
No. I mean, they could. I think they could definitely do something to us. if we had the actual sound clip, but maybe I'll just.
In that case, I'm
tell you what.
continue singing then.
How about you? You record yourself singing it, and I'll use that as the sound clip because it should be far enough away from the actual version that it won't be copyright striked. So
That's true. My voice is appalling, so I get it. Oh.
Anyway,
so I'm trying to see. They don't try to mute me. They want me to sing. By the way,
that's right.
Roberto said, "Can we do clapping for Mars in the end?" And I think we should do that. Yes, for Mars. And by the way, I attended my first Toastmasters after 2 years of not doing it, and they have a weird clap thing. They do this for clapping remotely, so you don't clap to everyone. It's fantastic. So people were doing that, and I didn't join
like jazz hands.
Jazz hands. They do this. Yeah. Probably.
I don't like the look of it.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I want to do this all the time.
Don't join Toastmasters. Jazz hands. Yeah.
Well, hey everybody, thanks for hanging out with us. We're gonna go raid somebody. Let's find out where we're gonna go. Let's go.
CM Griffin is.
CM Griffin.
Right now.
All right, well, let's go. Hey, everybody, we're going to head over. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, and we will be back tomorrow morning. Send us your questions.
Thanks,
thanks
for
Mickael.
having me. That was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.